G'day folks and welcome to Australian UFO Sightings official podcast. I'm your host Anthony Goodall and you're listening to Encounters Down Under. Here we invite guests on the show to tell us about their encounters with aliens and UFOs, where most of our episodes were streamed live from our Facebook page, which gave listeners the opportunity to ask questions to our guests regarding their encounter. If you have had an encounter and would like to be a guest on the show, please get in touch with us. You can send us a message through our Facebook page, Encounters Down Under, or send us an email at australianUFOsightings@outlook.com.au. Be sure to join us on Facebook and share with your friends and family to help us grow, and hopefully encourage others to come forward with their encounter. If you're an iTunes listener and a fan of the show, why not give us that 5-star rating and review, and you could have your review featured on the podcast. But enough of that, let's get into what you've been waiting for. So kick back, relax with your favourite beverage, and enjoy the show. G'day folks and welcome to another episode of Encounters Down Under. Grant Lavac joins us on the show, who has taken it upon himself to hit hard at the Australian government in terms of their actions in response to the recent release of admitting to the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena by the American government. He also discusses how you can help Australia pull their finger out, so to speak, to take the matter seriously and discuss it more openly. So please welcome to the show, Grant. Mate, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, and look, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you inviting me on and giving me a chance to have a chat with your audience and give them a sense as to what I've been able to uncover and discover through my research and FOIA requests for information down under. So it's good to be with you.
Yeah, no, mate, absolutely fantastic, mate. Because look, you've obviously sort of come out of the shadows, out of nowhere, and next minute you just popped up and like you've actually gone straight into the hard yards there, and like you just like all shots firing at the government there to try and figure out what the hell is going on our side of things when it comes to the whole UAP phenomenon. So, mate, look, let people know who you are in general and where you sort of come across to go and start going into this whole UAP task.
Yeah, so to give you, I guess, a bit of backstory, I'm based in Melbourne, originally from Sydney, born and bred, and I've always had a fascination for this topic ever since I was a young fella. My dad, when I was around about 7 years of age, 8 years of age, he took me to a UFO photo exhibition that they had on at the time at the Centrepoint Tower, now called Sydney Tower. And I remember it was these big blow-ups, these black and white blow-ups of all these famous, UFO sightings from back in the day. And I remember one of the photos that was blown up on this big canvas was the McMinnville photo from the 50s. And I remember just staring in that photo for what might have been a good 10, 15 minutes, just immersing myself in that environment and thinking how frightening but also fascinating it would have been to stand on that rancher's farm and just be looking at this anomalous object in the sky that you've never seen before. And that really captured my curiosity from a young age. And then growing up as a young fellow, every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock, you'd be watching the X-Files, and I had a subscription to Fortean Times, and I just always had a fascination for the topic. But it wasn't until, I guess, the New York Times articles that came out in December of 2017 that it really piqued my interest. And prior to that, my interest had kind of ebbed and flowed. So ever since really, 2017, and probably more so throughout COVID, I've really entrenched myself in this topic and just tried to soak everything up as best I can as a sponge, and just learn as much as I can from so many different people on this topic. And I'm really just standing on the shoulders of giants. Like there's guys like, Bill Chalker, Keith Basterfield, Paul Dean, Ross Coulthart, who's done some incredible work from an investigative journalist perspective, John Greenwald Jr. in the United States doing a lot of FOIA work. So I've really learnt from these guys and tried to engage my elected representatives in Australia to get a sense as to, well, what is Australia doing about UAP UFOs? Because our US ally and Five Eyes partner is taking this very, very seriously, but Australia doesn't seem to be doing anything, nor have they done anything since 1996 when they cancelled or they decided to no longer investigate reports of UAP and UFO. The Royal Australian Air Force no longer took reports, and they referred people that had a sighting to their local law enforcement authorities, the police, or recommended they reach out to their local civilian UFO organization like MUFON. So the driving force for me, I guess, ever since COVID's really hit, is trying to better understand, well, why is Australia not taking UAP so seriously when our US ally is? So that's really where I'm coming from with the research and the all of the Freedom of Information Act requests that I've been submitting to date, with nicely and surprisingly some success, which is good.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Look, I've always had like a bit of a thoughts to like try and attack, do the same as you, like, go into the Australian government and try to hit them up as well. But I have a deep feeling that America has their pockets in our government and our military in regards to UAPs too deeply for us to even go and want to even start splurging on that sort of information. Like I know Paul Dean's done a lot of attacking of the government there in regards to UAP back in the past there, and like he's done an amazing job. He's even attacked the American government. But when in regards to Australia coming forward with their information, I just feel like they're not going to be really open to that sort of thing until America is sort of admitted to what their own investigations have come to.
I think you're right. I think it's a blessing and a curse that Australia is very attached at the hip to the US and for our national defence. And I think Australia's been a staunch ally of the US dating back to World War II, and I essentially think that, like with a lot of things in the US, ever since Kennedy challenged the country to reach the moon in a decade, ever since then, I think Australia and other countries around the world have always looked to the US for leadership and really followed their lead. And I do think and hope that Australia will eventually fall into line and follow the path that the US has taken on the UAP topic. I'm just not 100% sure why there's a few things that are happening. Either Australia is the Australian government or the Australian Department of Defence is watching very closely as to how this is all playing out in Congress in the US and what reception this is going to receive by the US public, because I think there's still a lot of political stigma and potential political suicide that a lot of people associate with this topic. But to a lot of the elected senators and members of parliament that have concerns that touching this topic is political suicide, I would say to them, well, have a chat with the Senator for Tasmania, Senator Peter Whish-Wilson, who on the 27th of October last year at the Senate estimates hearing, he challenged then Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Mel Hupfield on UAP and what is Australia doing about UAP following the release of the US ODNI's preliminary assessment on UAP. And I think Mel Hupfield was very much caught off guard by Senator Whish-Wilson's line of questioning. And Senator Whish-Wilson wasn't satisfied with the answers that he received. So he's been pushing for more information and clarity ever since. And he recently got re-elected this year. So, to senators and members of parliament that are worried that talking about this topic is going to piss off or challenge, worry their constituents, I would say, well, just look at the political record and response that Senator Whish-Wilson's had. And there are other senators that I'm hearing in the background that are starting to take this topic seriously as well. So, yeah, I think the Australia is keeping its cards very close to its chest, and I think watching very closely as to what the US is going to do and how this is all going to play out before they actually step into the arena and start making their voice heard as well. And the other thing too, this is the other thing to remember, is that in December of last year, President Biden signed into law the National Defense Authorization Act. And if you take the time to read the mandates, the clauses that are in that document pertaining to unidentified aerial phenomena, there is one clause in that entire legislation pertaining to UAP that says one of the duties of the office that will be dedicated to the investigation of UAP, UFO in the US, one of its duties will be to coordinate with allies and partners of the United States to better understand the extent and nature of UAP. So as a Five Eyes partner of the United States, you can bet your bottom dollar that this office, whether it's the All Anomalies Domain resolution office, RO, or whatever that it evolves into being, you can bet your bottom dollar over the course of its 6-year mission, they're going to reach out to Australia at some point and say, can you help us out, guys? Because we're having a really tough time figuring out what UAP are. We've been looking at it for, decades. And Australia's actually got almost as long as a history of looking at UFOs, UAP, as the US does, dating back to almost the Roswell era. And if the US comes to us and says, well, can you help us out, guys? Provide us with some data that's going to help us better understand the nature of UAP, because we know that you've had some anomalous sightings and objects reported at our joint US-Australia military installation, Pine Gap, in the Northern Territory. And there have been other reports of anomalous objects at the Harold E. Holt base in Western Australia. You've got Woomera in South Australia. You've got Maralinga. So these military installations, to name a few, have had a long history of having these sightings of UAP, or unusual aerial sightings, as the Royal Australian Air Force referred to it for many, many years. And when the US comes knocking on our door and says, guys, can you help us out to try and better understand what's going on? What is the Royal Australian Air Force and Australian Department of Defence going to do? Oh, sorry, guys, we really haven't investigated this topic since 1996, nor have we seen the classified data or classified version of ODNI's preliminary assessment on UAP. So it was only in February of this year that the Australian Department of Defence had actually bothered to read ODNI's preliminary assessment on UAP, which came out on the 25th of June of last year. Unfortunately, Australia is really burying its head in the sand on this topic. And is towing the line that, well, there's nothing to see here, move along. It's probably just prosaic explanations or benign phenomena, and could be, foreign adversarial technology and so on. So they're really just not taking this topic seriously. And that's very frustrating when, our US ally and Five Eyes partner is, and for good reason, because there is, if the Royal Australian, and I know I'm kind of, yapping on a bit here, but if the Australian Department of Defence or Royal Australian Air Force still thinks that there is no compelling or scientific reason to devote resources to the investigation of UAP, which is exactly the reason why they terminated their unusual aerial sightings policy formally in 2013. If they cannot find any compelling or scientific reason, I would say to them, well, just have a look at the ODNI's preliminary assessment, because out of the 144 case reports of UAP, only one could be positively identified. 143 remain completely unknown. So that's a success rate of less than 1% to identify what those 144 reports were. So if the Australian Department of Defence needs a compelling reason, there's 143 of them right there. And the fact that you haven't been looking at this topic since 1996 tells, I think, many people like myself that it's time for you to review your position on this topic and decide if you're going to follow suit that of the US and take it seriously.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It sort of makes me like going back onto like how much power the Americans must have like over Australia. If you look at the rest of the world, like they've obviously had their own experiences, their own encounters, their own investigations into what UAPs or UFOs, whatever you want to call them, whatever term. There's so many different countries around the world that America doesn't really touch on, like they have that strong an alliance with to be able to control them, saying, hey, look, don't be going revealing anything special. But yet there seems to be no real evidence from other countries, like nothing defining, nothing credible, nothing that can rule out any possible misidentifications. So, like, where's their evidence coming out into the worldwide? But yet we seem to be so focused on the American government on what they want to be releasing. Yet we've got, like, Russia, for instance, China, they want to go, obviously, like, maybe the same boat too, of they don't want to go and reveal how much they know about unknown technologies just yet, maybe. I don't know. There could be other reasons, but you still have those smaller countries that don't really have much involvement with the Americans to be able to, say, like, look, we have found these little weird things, UFOs or whatever, but still nothing gets released.
Well, look what happened only a couple months ago. Brazil held a public, I believe it was a congressional hearing, went for about 5.5 hours, talking about the UFO issue as it pertains to Brazil. And Brazil has had a long history of having, sightings, and the military have been involved with, I wouldn't say dogfights, but tailing or trying to chase down UAP. I mean, there's one example where another country outside of the US is talking about this topic and taking it seriously. And then you have obviously Australia's other Five Eyes partner and border ally with the US, Canada. Canada is now taking this topic very seriously and has concerns around, well, what threats do UAP pose to our nuclear capabilities and installations and nuclear powered assets? And I mean, if you go through over the last couple of decades, I mean, France has a long history of taking this topic very seriously. I believe they published some scientific materials a good number of years ago, saying that there's a there to this phenomena, and it needs to be studied and taken seriously, and scientific scrutiny and scientific method needs to be applied to this topic. I mean, the UK is an interesting fish. Country. They're very much like Australia, and they're sitting on their ass. They're not doing anything. The Condine report came out, a couple of decades ago, and they pretty much concluded that no, there's nothing to worry about. Nothing to see here. Move along, folks. But there are other countries around the world that are that they've have a history of talking about this topic and taking it seriously. And I think more and more countries are going to start following the loud noise that the US is making, the Americans are making, and start to follow their lead. I mean, Russia and China, we know that China has a program, from all accounts, it has a program to investigate this phenomena. You have, I mean, there is the famous incident over Iran in the late 70s. So, it's not like this issue or this topic is isolated to the US, but I think that the US has the largest and strongest military power in the world, that there's a combination of real phenomena happening in the skies above North America, and you also have the potential for top secret black budget tech that's being tested and being misidentified as UAP or UFO because the military is so entrenched with the private sector, with your Lockheed Martins, your all of those contractors that do top secret work with the US, Boeing being the other one. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there is a lot of these sightings are top secret tech that has been in development for many decades that we don't know a single thing about. I mean, you just need to go back and have a look at the history of Area 51 and what came out of Area 51. You had the U2, you had the SR-71 Blackbird, stealth bomb technology came in there, and that wasn't revealed for several decades after it was actually even came off the production line. So I think that the US is making the loudest noise on this topic because of the military presence that they have and the sheer populace that's over there. But I think that other countries are going to be more open to talking about this topic because they feel that they can now do so and not be ostracized or ridiculed or see the same level of stigma that has plagued this topic, sadly, for 75 years, because US lawmakers and members of the US Department of Defense are now actively talking about this topic, and they're encouraging their military aviators and personnel to come forward and report on it, which they haven't in the past. So stigma, unfortunately, I think is a product of the military. I mean, for so long, there's been an effort to ridicule or downplay if a pilot or a military aviator has a sighting. So out of fear of reprisals or being the the joke of the room, folks wouldn't talk about it. And I suspect that still goes on today. You have commercial, general aviation, and military aviators that won't touch this topic. They won't talk about it because of that stigma. But the stigma is slowly starting to come down. The walls are starting to slowly fall on this topic. And I think that's in part because of the legislation that has now been passed and that was advocated by so strongly by Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Marco Rubio. You've got some very strong advocates in the US that are pushing hard. Tim Purchett, those guys, they're having some big conversations publicly and behind closed doors, where they've been exposed to some pretty apparently awesome and hair-raising stuff that's got them concerned enough to the point where they've now passed some pretty big legislation that is going to force the US Department of Defense to reveal its hand and start to be a lot more transparent on this topic.
Yeah, so it sort of makes you wonder too, like obviously when it comes to pilots and that, when they're claiming they're seeing these objects, or they withheld this information with this news stat that coming out or whatever. They're going to start bringing out whistleblowers, so they're not going to be.
So the Intelligence Authorization Act. Yep.
That one. With these pilots, is there going to be like any accountability held with the governments or any companies, businesses that have been, giving reprisals to these pilots there, where they're losing their jobs, or they're being questioned with their mentality? Like, I feel personally like there needs to be some sort of accountability and some sort of reprisal, at least for these pilots. Just sort of have their own. Their life back.
I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, heads will certainly roll, because there's a lot of folks that have been, their lives have been ruined for talking out and just stating what it is they saw. They don't know what they saw, but they saw something, and they say something, and then their job security is threatened, their pension is threatened, they're made to be they're ridiculed and made fun of. So I think the ambitions that the US Congress has with the Intelligence Authorization Act, when hopefully it gets signed into law this year, the anti-reprisal legislation and whistleblower protections that are incorporated in that bill are significant. So you're going to see a lot of folks that were not able to talk because they had a non-disclosure agreement, or just the nature of their top secret security clearance. They couldn't break their security oath. They're now going to be a position where they can come out and talk about this, probably more so still behind closed doors to Congress in a closed session, but they'll be able to finally say what they know and say what they've seen. And if there are reprisals taken upon people that say something, well, part of that legislation is that, if you have reprisals placed against you for speaking out to Congress, well, then you can sue. You can sue your employer, and your employer is going to be liable for unfair dismissals, or any reprisal actions that they take, or trying to really push someone around and make their life really challenging for just talking out. I think there's now a shift around this whole need to know emphasis to a need to share, because I think Congress is worried that if a UAP turns out to be foreign adversarial technology, which a lot of people don't really put a lot of stock in that, if you listen to folks like Elizondo and Christopher Mellon and other folks. But if it was foreign adversarial technology, it only takes one to have first strike capability. And if something like that was to happen, well, that is a greater intelligence failure than that of 9/11. So I think, and part of 9/11 was the fact that the intelligence communities and different agencies, the three-letter agencies, didn't share any information. So I think Congress is really wanting to start getting a lot of this information out of these compartmentalized silos that's been guarded so closely by faceless, men and women in the U.S. Department of Defense that have been the gatekeepers of this topic for so long, and get this information out so Congress can actually have some oversight over what what is going on in these special access programs, or unacknowledged special access programs, or unacknowledged waived special access programs that are rumored to be operating under the cover of darkness. So I think that when this legislation gets passed, there are going to be a lot of folks in terms of big corporations that have safeguarded and kept a lot of this information secret for so long. I think they're going to be shitting bricks because they know that this information's coming out and there's not a damn thing they can do to stop it.
Yeah, going back to foreign adversaries there, like if these were like for instance, like you had the drones following around that military ship. What was it, off California? Was it San Diego? I can't remember where exactly it was, but they had like multiple drone swarms around one of these Navy military ships. Now, if they knew these were adversaries, surely having those drones within that range of that ship there would be counted as a threat, going from a military perspective. So the thing I don't understand is, like, obviously, like, I'm not sure, going from the Congress meeting there, one of the guys asked the question of, have you tried to make contact with these unknown objects or crafts or whatever? And the response was no. So like, it makes me wonder, like, with these drones, did they try and contact these drones to try and communicate like what their reasons for being there are, or even trying to say, look, like, coming into our airspace, this is known as becoming a threat. If you keep coming closer, we're going to go and take fire. But by sounds of it, going from I can't remember where I heard the information from, but they basically, one of the sailors is like going, look, we've got these objects here. What do you want to do about them? And the officer's like, just let them alone, leave them alone. So it makes me sort of wonder how much is being known about these drones that is being hidden away, that the hierarchies are sort of keeping it hush hush between their sailors, the military, whoever's on the ships, and these are the normal guys. Like I'm saying, like lower ranks, the grunts of the ships, basically. They're going, I don't know what these are, but the officers are like going, yeah, look, we know what they are, but we just can't tell you, sort of thing. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. It does, yeah, and you raise a really good point. Like the US has a serious drone issue at the moment, whether it's foreign adversarial drone technology or it's homegrown drone technology. There is a real problem, and there are people that are thinking, well, if you watch the public hearing that the US had, the first public congressional hearing that Congress had back in the middle of May, first public hearing in 54 years, first of my lifetime. It was very, very exciting to watch. And you had Scott Bray and Roger Moultrie come in, and they tried to sell the story that this is just a drone problem. I don't think they were being as forthcoming as they should have been on this topic. And I think they're positioning this, that it's all right, don't worry, go back to your normal lives. This is just a drone problem. We're getting to the bottom of it. But then if you look at these drone swarms that have been reported, I mean, Jeremy Corbell was the one that released information about the swarms, I think it was above the USS Russell. And the question that I asked, well, why isn't the Navy engaging these drones? Yeah. If you don't know what it is, bring it down, either shoot it down or bring it down with a directed energy weapon and find out its source, track down. And so why aren't they engaging these drones? Is there a fear that, well, maybe that's the intention of whoever the operators are of the drones, is the intention of the drone swarm to capture a glimpse of what the US Navy's response would be to drone activity, so that they can, if it is foreign adversarial, then they can get a leg up on how US responds, in a defense situation like that. But that was my, if it was only drones, well, why not engage it, bring it down so you can identify what the source is? Because if you're not, the Navy is looking grossly incompetent by not being able to get a handle of a drone issue. And so if it is just drones, then there is a huge embarrassment problem that the US Department of Defense and Navy is going to face by the strongest military in the world and the most expensive toys. If the US is not able to identify the source of a drone, then it's got some big problems on its hands. If it's not a drone, or if it is, let's say, for example, it is a drone, but it's of non-human intelligence, then okay, well then that's exactly why we need a program like ARO that US Congress is pushing for to investigate this and get to the bottom of it, and have members of the military proactively report these accounts rather than going to the captain of the vessel and it just being flubbed off or brushed aside by the commanding officer. So if you watch, one thing I will say is, if you watch Lieutenant Ryan Graves, who was part of the squadron that cited I think it was the Gimbal and the Go Fast UAPs in, I think it was 2015, I can't quite remember. But if you listen to his most recent interview on the Lex Friedman podcast, which is a really fascinating interview, he was telling an account where after the Gimbal account, where a lot of folks went in a closed room to actually have a look at the footage, the ATFLIR footage that was captured of the gimbal craft, they were like, "What the hell is this? I've never seen anything like this before. What are these objects?" And the commanding officer, the captain of the ship, comes down, walks in the room, sees what's on screen, and within a couple of seconds goes, "Huh," and then turns around and walks out. So Ryan Graves was under the impression, based on what he relayed in that interview, that there are people that know what these things are. That his impression was the commanding officer of that ship, the captain, knew what he was looking at. So either these are UAP that are known about, that the military don't want to touch it, or it's something closer to home, like some top secret black budget technology that commanding those that are in positions of authority and commanding officers and captains have been told to shut their mouth about, because it's top secret tech that only a few folks have a need to know. And my issue with that is this: if Ryan Graves has been pushing hard on, well, UAP pose a potential safety of flight risk, and if the Boeings and the Lockheed Martins of the world are testing top secret technology and black budget tech that the likes of military aviators have never seen before, and that is appearing to defy the known laws of physics and act in ways that folks have not seen before. If this technology is being tested on US soil without the prior knowledge of military aviators, then the US Department of Defense has that's a massive breach of duty of care that it has of its military aviators and personnel. So, and that's where I think, if this all comes out that there is some there has been if these stories of crash retrieval programs are true, which Congress is really trying to chase down via this new legislation, via the Intelligence Authorization Act, if crash retrievals are in fact true, and there have been efforts to reverse engineer non-human craft, and if you listen to the likes of people like Frank Milburn, who have his sources have told him that the US has been able to reverse engineer a shitty version of a UAP, in quotes. And if the US has in fact recovered and reverse engineered top secret tech, and are testing that tech on military aviators without their knowledge, then heads will roll when
Yeah, it
that
sort of
comes
makes
out.
you wonder too, like just how much has been hidden in this world, just by all that, like because Roswell being the first real big sort of crash retrieval, basically, and I suppose like if you want to look down that sort of path there, like our technology sort of boomed from that, going from that timeline there, like we say again, like compact discs, computer chips was like everything just sort of just boomed from that sort of moment on, and just, it sort of makes you wonder like how much of this technology do they have hidden behind those closed doors that could easily just advance human civilization? And it's like, but why hide so much of that technology when we could just sort of like
Yeah.
advance so quickly into a massive benefit of the world?
I'm with you. I'm 100% with you. That's my massive gripe. And I posted this not long ago on Twitter, and my comments were, if call me naive, but if it turns out to be true that the US government has successfully recovered, or has had these successful crash retrieval programs, and has sacrificed the advancement of human civilization in favor of national security, then that pisses me right off.
Yeah,
uh, because think of the trillions of dollars that have been wasted on space exploration, on trying to help impoverished and poorly developed countries of the world. I mean, if there is this technology out there that has a propulsion system that we've never seen the likes of before, and operates in ways that defy the known laws of physics, then that's technology that science could benefit from understanding and researching and studying, and just think of the technology and advancements that could come from that. So that's why I'm really hoping that these, a lot of people say, if, well, Roswell 75 years ago to this year, a couple months back, if there was in fact a craft that was recovered, and it's been sitting in a top secret military installation like an S4 or an Area 51 or wherever it might be, and for 75 years the top scientists that work for or contracted by the US military industrial complex, if they can't figure this out because they've so compartmentalized their special access programs and unacknowledged special access programs and UWSAPs, because scientists can't talk to one another or share or collaborate on better understanding the science, then that just tells you that science does not benefit from compartmentalization. And I would much prefer to see the scientific and and academic communities collaborate on better understanding this technology. And granted, there's always national security implications, and you have to be mindful that what you tell the world, you also tell your enemies. But surely there can be a balance on maintaining national security interests, but also advancing and progressing, this blue marble of ours. Because if we don't, we're never going to get to being a type 1 civilization. We're going to be so stuck in this way of tribal warfare and warring games with one another that we're never going to progress as a species. That's my big fear and gripe anyway.
yeah. When you talk about compartmentalizing scientific research and whatever, like you look at NASA back in the '60s there when they were trying to get to the moon, and now they say like we can't get back to the moon because we lost this technology. That could be a result of this whole compartmentalizing the scientific research into building rockets and that. And the guys who were in development of building these rockets to get to the moon continuously for, was it like 14, 15 missions to the moon or something like that? Don't quote me on that, I don't know. But
Yeah, no, you're about right. I think it's
But yeah, all of a sudden it just went kapoof. It was like, oh, we're not going to the moon now because we can't afford it, or it's whatever reasons they've come up with. But yet they're saying they can't get back to the moon because they don't have the technology anymore. It's like, well, how do you just lose decades of research into building rockets to get you to the moon, basically? And it's just confusing on how this government works. That's so supposed to be so efficient and so advanced in their own ways, basically, but yet still can't control how much of their own information that they're trying to contain for themselves. It's really strange.
and I mean, look what happens when government becomes complacent as well. NASA's become complacent, and as a result, that gave rise to the Elon Musks of the world, and the Jeff Bezos, and those guys are now at the forefront. They're at the frontier of in developing technology that's gonna get us beyond the moon, and Elon Musk is on. He's laughing all the way to the bank because now NASA is paying him for every launch that he puts up and gets new satellites up there, or the Artemis mission. I mean, look at the Artemis mission as an example, and I'm a big supporter of NASA. I really admire the ingenuity and the innovation and the brilliant minds at NASA. I do think that they unfortunately have been given scraps in terms of funding. I mean, if you look at the Artemis mission, which has now been scrapped for its second launch, and hopefully is going to launch again soon, they're essentially, they haven't got any money to do anything new, so they're having to reuse the the engine systems from the Challenger spacecraft. Sorry, not the Challenger, the shuttle, the shuttle, the space shuttlecrafts, which were retired, almost 2 decades ago. So, it's unfortunate that NASA has kind of fallen by the wayside, and they they led the charge for so many years, and they were seen by the rest of the world as, if we can get to the moon in 10 years, then we humans are capable of doing anything. And then after they stopped going to the moon, they seem to lose that appetite for new discovery. I mean, the exceptions to the rule obviously are, the amazing work that the Hubble telescope has done, and now the James Webb telescope. I mean, that's really exciting to see what comes out of James Webb. But you've now got, um, you know these other private enterprises that are leading the charge, and I really advocate for and value the work that Professor Avi Loeb is doing of the Galileo project. He is saying, well, we're not going to wait for the government to tell us what is in our skies. We're going to go out there and look ourselves because the skies aren't classified. So they're, as the professor of astronomy at Harvard University, he is gathering a coalition of scientists and academics and people, philanthropists that have a lot of money, and in trying to build these new technology telescopes in the effort of trying to capture a high resolution, high fidelity image or footage of a UAP. So they're not waiting for the likes of the government to provide them with that data. Avi Loeb doesn't want any government data, because if he gets it, it's classified and he can't do anything with it. He can't open source it. He can't get other scientists to look at it. So I have more hope for an endeavor like the Galileo project than I do for some form of disclosure to come from the US or other governments around the world. So I hope I'm wrong on that, but that's, I think Avi his head is in the right place, and he's not driven by ego, and he's not plagued by stigma. He's just, he knows what his mission is, and he's going for it.
Yeah, it's sort of frustrating too. Like when when they first brought out the initial footage there of admitting to UAPs there, what was it, 2017? I think with the Tic Tac there. Like as good as it was, but it just wasn't convincing enough for me. I'm sure a lot of people will be feeling the same too, because like it doesn't really show much compelling evidence to say, look, this is actually a UFO craft. You know, it could be foreign adversaries, it could be non-human technologies. There's nothing there to really indicate what exactly we were looking at. All we had to really go by was a pilot's recollection of the whole events, and yet we only still get given, what was it, 30 seconds of the footage, and it's like, well,
Hmm.
where's the rest of it? Where was this whole compelling story that you just given us to say this is what we're looking at, and yet there's a video to go with it? Does not give any credibility to the whole situation.
Where's the remaining 4 minutes from the gimbal footage? You know,
Yeah,
that hasn't. Why was not the full footage released? And you know, on its at face value, I agree with you. I think the Tic Tac, gimbal, and Go Fast videos, they're interesting, but they're not compelling on their own because we're not seeing any of the 5 observables in any of those videos. We're not seeing, instant acceleration. We're not seeing anti-gravity. We're not seeing evasion of radar detection. We're not seeing transmedium capabilities. All of the 5 observables, we're not seeing any of them in any of those videos. But then if you take the totality of those videos with the visual the visual evidence or the visual sightings, I guess, from the pilots, the sensor data that is available. I mean, you've got folks like for the Nimitz incident with the Tic Tac, you know, you've got Kevin Day reporting that the Tic Tac was picked up at 80,000 feet and then just dropped down to, was it 20 feet, 15 feet above sea level in a matter of a second. So that data, you know, when looked at in concert with the available at FLIR, the video footage with pilot testimony and other data, starts to give you a bit of a picture that there is something strange here that warrants scientific scrutiny and investigation. And it's unfortunate that the general public, the taxpaying public, has yet to see any of the videos that has really flabbergasted lawmakers behind closed doors. And if you listen to folks like Hal Puthoff, who say that there is in the possession of the US government the highest resolution and highest fidelity footage and imagery of UAP that you can imagine. The US taxpayer, unfortunately, is probably never going to see that footage. But we need something other than what has been made available at the moment because it's too ambiguous. It's not definitive enough. We need to see some high fidelity, high resolution imagery that is going to, convince. I mean, we're already convinced, us in this community that know that there is a phenomena, but it's about convincing and increasing an awareness to folks that have no idea about this topic, that just go about their lives and just do their 9 to 5 and would prefer to watch the Kardashians on their smartphone at night. And that's fine if they want to live their life just going about that and ignorance is bliss mentality, no problem. But I'm sure that there are a lot of folks out there in the general populace that would find this topic as fascinating as I do if they were to see some more convincing data, which unfortunately we haven't seen that convincing data to date. That has been verified and corroborated by multiple sources and sensors and so on. So, and hopefully that's why an endeavor like the Galileo project may be able to produce that data that we're looking for. So, but I will say it is one of the gripes that I've had, and I know I kind of yap on and go on a different tangent, but one of the gripes that I've got in Australia is not only is the Australian Department of Defence burying its head in the sand and not wanting to touch this topic, the Australian mainstream media is also very, very slow on the uptake. Credit to them that they are starting to cover this topic more frequently than they have in the past, but they're still they're not exercising an ounce of journalistic due diligence on this topic. You'll get occasionally Jeremy Corbell come on Sunrise in the morning and talk about, well, what's the latest goings on in the US, basically. And he'll and credit to Jeremy Corbell. A lot of people may not agree with his narrative. I mean, I think he's done a great job of trying to increase an awareness of the UAP topic to the masses. And I credit the mainstream media for doing that, particularly Ross Coulthart with his now 3 documentaries that he's produced through the 7 News Spotlight program. You had Liz Hayes do a program on 9 not long ago. So, 10's talked about it. The mainstream channels are talking about it, but none of them to date have challenged Australia's defence leadership on this topic and asked the question of the Minister for Defence and Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles, why is Australia not taking UAP seriously when our US ally and Five Eyes partner is? That's the question I want the mainstream media to ask, so people like me don't have to ask it and try and get to the bottom of it through Freedom of Information Act requests. So that's my frustration with the media, is that they're still not taking this topic seriously like they should be.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like the Australian government should just come straight out afterwards, at least saying, look, we are looking at this as well. Obviously, America's handling it as a potential threat to, airways, our own defense departments and stuff like that, And obviously, if America is holding it as a potential threat, then the whole of the world should be considering it as a potential threat as well.
Absolutely. And that's the whole angle that I've been pushing. My questions have been repeatedly, what strategies are you being the Australian Department of Defence and Royal Australian Air Force, what strategies are you putting in place to mitigate the risks inherent that UAP pose, not just military aviators, but commercial pilots as well? To give you an example, the Royal Australian Air Force stopped investigating UFOs in 1996. I queried with the Roger Stanovic, I can't pronounce his surname if I've botched that, but he's the director of MUFON Australia and New Zealand. I reached out to him when I was doing some of my research, and I asked him, well, across a comparable time range that the UAP task force in the US was looking at these 144 case reports of UAP, from 2004 to basically 2021, how many Australian reports of UAP were received by MUFON in that time frame? And they had received 1,178 reports of UAP in that comparable time frame. Now, surely there'll be a percentage of those that are prosaic, misidentification. There will be natural phenomena, but the Royal Australian Air Force ceased its investigation of unusual aerial sightings, or UAP UFO, back in 1996 because it did not have any compelling or scientific reason to devote resources to the topic going forward, despite the fact that they could not identify, they could not explain 3% of the cases of UAP throughout their lifetime of their unusual aerial sightings policy. Now, 3%, if you take 3% of that 1,178 figure that I gave you from MUFON, that's about 35 cases of true unknowns. They could be true UAP. So again, isn't that the fact that you can't identify everything that you're looking at, isn't that enough of a compelling reason to continue to devote resources to investigate it, to understand what it is, whether it is foreign adversarial in nature? And obviously the intelligence community looks at foreign adversarial, wants to know what our adversaries and friends are doing. But Australia is a member of the Five Eyes, and the Five Eyes share signals intelligence. And the reason why they share signals intelligence is to better understand, to assess and better understand what potential threats might lie ahead from foreign adversaries, and so that they can strengthen their capabilities and mitigate their vulnerabilities. And if Australia is not, if the US is wanting to share signals intelligence with Australia because they're going to be coming to us and asking us questions, but Australia has no interest in this topic. And a quote I'll give you is that one of the most recent Freedom of Information Act documents that I received was a briefing paper for the Chief of Air Force. And there were talking points in that briefing paper so that essentially if the Chief of Air Force was asked questions on UAP by members of Parliament or the media, he had a script that he could follow. And one of the questions was, to the effect of, does the Australian Department of Defence has the Australian Department of Defence collaborated with other countries and allies on this topic? And the answer was flatly, the talking point was no. There is no desire to collaborate on this topic. The Australian Department of Defence has no desire to collaborate with allies on this topic. And that is a real unfortunate shame, and I think is going to bite the Australian Department of Defence in the arse when this topic blows up with the signing of the Intelligence Authorization Act, because you can bet your ass there's going to be a hell of a lot more congressional hearings that are going to take place, if not this year, in 2023. And that, I think, is really going to shift the landscape of this topic on an international level. And Australia is not going to have any other choice than to enter the arena and start taking this topic seriously. So they're going to get pulled into it, dragging, kicking and screaming. I just want them to be a bit more proactive and get into the game, get off their ass and get into the game before they're actually dragged into it. And they look like a bit of an embarrassment to the other developed countries of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I hope the rest of the world sort of follows suit and start actually sharing everything they know, or anything basically, on what they have in this whole situation. Because as frustrating as it is, yeah, Australia is really lagging behind on this whole concept for so long. We've had so many sightings, encounters, historically, as you mentioned earlier on the show. There's been so much that's happened, that needs to be released, needs to be explained at least. Like you look at Westall of all sightings. That's over 100 people there, bloody seeing this thing there, and there's still no explanation. Like, that's the biggest cover up of Australians' history with the UFO situation, and that's just gone
Yeah,
disappeared with that sort of information. In
totally
regards to
by the
that.
wayside. I agree with you. And look, if Westall was a prosaic explanation, well, where's the documentation from the Air Force to indicate, well, what its determination was? What determination did it make on what could explain the Westall incident? And apparently there was, a comprehensive report that was compiled by the then Department of Supply, which has conveniently and mysteriously vanished. It's no longer, it can't be tracked down. So I think Westall is certainly a cold case that would it would be wonderful to see that revisited at an official capacity and have that looked at again, because it begs more questions than it does answers. There are so many witnesses. You had a teacher, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but a teacher observed it, and then he was essentially told to shut up and keep his mouth shut. Why? Because it was a true it was the true phenomena, an unidentified flying object that potentially could be non-human intelligence, or was it a top secret project that was being tested and that happened to go belly up and have a bit of an early landing, and it was exposed to all these kids. I mean, one way or the other, Westall was now what, 50 years ago. So I think it's time for, if it was top secret tech, well, I think it's a safe bet for the military to now come out and reveal what it was. But if it wasn't, and it was something that is still unexplained to this date, then that's a compelling reason for it to be further investigated.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say something then too. Now I've lost my train of thought now because it's yeah. Where was it going with it now?
Well, Westall is, I would say, on par with the aerial school case out of Zimbabwe. I mean, I know that the aerial phenomenon was a great documentary that came out a couple of months ago, but that's Westall is really Australia's version of the aerial school event to a degree. Not so much what was seen, but the fact that you had so many witnesses observe and report comparable descriptions of, I mean, sure, there's discrepancies over time because everyone's memory fades, certainly after 50 years. But if you were to look at the witness testimony, what they saw, what they drew, I think you have a pretty good, there's some alignment there with what what they all saw. So if it does truly remain unexplained to this day, then yeah, absolutely, it's one that should be should warrant further investigation and scrutiny.
Yeah. It also makes me wonder, like going on a bit of a a bit of a deeper down the wormhole sort of thing, like going on control of how much information is being shared and all sorts of stuff. It sort of makes you wonder: is there some sort of like, I'm going to say extraterrestrial or something like that, some sort of higher being control that is giving this information like a slow release? On how much information is being taken out, how much is being given. It sort of really does make you wonder how much is, or who in that matter is controlling this whole agenda of the information. What's being kept secret.
Yeah, there's this I think disclosure. Like I remember Lou Elizondo said that he would always frame it as, well, disclosure's already happened. Well, I think disclosure is very subjective. It means different things to different people. I mean, if disclosure to you means that UFOs are real, then 100% disclosure has already occurred, because the US government has said that UAP are real. There are these things that we cannot identify. If disclosure to you means that there is an extraterrestrial presence already here, or one that is visiting us now as opposed to has been for millennia, then that level of disclosure, that's a tough one. I mean, I would love to believe that there is an extraterrestrial presence that has been visiting us for thousands of years. I mean, if you look at all of the rock carvings from different corners of the globe, and the petroglyphs, the imagery that they depict, you look at some of that imagery and you think, well, that looks strikingly resembles what we would know in pop culture as an alien grey, or as an extraterrestrial. So I don't know. My hope is that disclosure. There seems to be this kind of drip feed of information that's been happening since 2017, and you got this very slow release of information, trying to almost desensitize the general populace that there is this unknown phenomena that we're. If the governments of the world know more than what they're telling, then they want to slowly drip feed this information to the populace, so that there isn't this fear and panic, and world financial markets don't just overturn overnight. So is there this drip feed of disclosure, or is there this all leading up to one significant event, which will be concrete and irrefutable evidence that there is life beyond our planet. We're not alone in the universe. I mean, that's the if we can answer that big question, the three big questions are we alone? Is there a God? And what happens when you die? And if we can answer, are you alone? Are we alone? Then, man, you're going to get so many more people looking up at the stars with intrigue and wonder, and wanting to aspire to reach the stars. And you're going to have a huge, I think, blow up of people wanting to immerse themselves in the discovery sciences, and astronomy and space exploration. That if there is this disclosure that we aren't alone in the universe, that's only going to benefit humanity, I think, and move us forward. So I hope that there is a significant event, as opposed to this kind of desensitizing drip feed of information, because it's painfully slow and it's frustrating. We've been waiting 75 years, and we still don't know a lot more today than what we did in 1947. You have so many stories. I mean, what evidence do we really have? I mean, you've got a lot of anecdotal evidence, you've got a lot of stories, and experiences. I hope that experiences will have their day in due course. That once the nuts and bolts of UAP is kind of solidified in the populace's mind that this is real, that experiencers get their day and can feel confident that their stories are going to be taken seriously as well. So, because unfortunately they have been subject to the same amount, if not more, stigma and ridicule than members of the military have when they report a UAP. So that's. I mean, we live in exciting times, but that's my hope that experiencers do have their day and they're able to get some answers on what they saw, rather than having to live with the shame and the embarrassment that they tell someone what they saw and they're fearful that they're going to be made fun of by just recounting what they saw with their own two eyes. They can't explain it, but they saw something. So I hope that they get some peace over time when we know more information. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Like there's so much stigma and ridicule attached to the whole subject in general, and like as you're saying, like just the public, especially on social media, you see it everywhere. Like people just getting thrown to the dirt, just saying like you're full of shit. Like, and I'm like, this isn't to say like or give it discredit to anyone's sightings and stuff like. But obviously, yes, a lot of things do get misidentified. There's a lot of explanations to a lot of things that have an easy explanation. It's just people need to go and sort of do a bit of homework, get an idea of what is actually out there. Like people confusing Starlink or even planets in the sky, not keeping an eye on the astral formations of constellations, etc., and all sorts of stuff. Um, like it's fine. Like people need to learn at some stage, and that, but like it doesn't deserve the ridicule that people have been
Oh,
receiving.
absolutely.
It's horrible, and
It's
I won't discredit anyone of their sightings. I would always try and help them to go, look, this is what I think it is. I'll never claim it's going to be an alien craft because, for one, if half the stuff that I get anyway, it doesn't give any convincing evidence that it's going to be that looks like an alien craft. Unless you can give me something that has actual windows, a little alien there that's not CGI waving at us, going, how you going? Then yeah, I'd love to be able to have that evidence. But what the public seems to keep capturing always seems to be something that can be explainable, or it could be something that's just unknown that can't be really explained to the full extent of what evidence can give us. And again, it's not to discredit anyone, but it's just more so to say, like, we're not going to admit it's an alien craft just yet because it's just an unknown thing at this point in time. And look,
yeah,
I feel just there needs to be a lot more credibility to the UFO communities in that sort of sense. That just not
yeah.
everyone's UFO.
I completely agree with you, and I unfortunately have not yet had. I've never had a sighting of a UFO UAP. It's on my bucket list. I would bloody love to, at least to see something. But the approach that I take is if you're an experiencer, if you've had a sighting or what you believe to be an abduction event, who am I to judge your experience? That's your experience. That's what you know. That's what you believe to be true, and that's your experience. And I can't judge. I can't judge that experience. I can question the details around your experience to try and get a better understanding as to, well, what did you see, what occurred, and so on, so I can gain a picture in my own mind to satisfy my own curiosity and to better try and understand what you had experienced. But I approach the approach that I take with experiences is safety in numbers and strength in numbers. For experiences that are out there that have not shared their story with anyone in the past because they're fearful of stigma and ridicule, I would say to them, listen to your podcast, Encounters Down Under, or get on the AUFOS Facebook group and start a conversation with folks that are just like you and I, that are very open to this topic and fascinated by it, because they're not going to shut you down or ridicule you for having an experience. If you have a conversation with someone that you don't know, or you clearly know does not have an appetite for this topic, then you need to be aware of the fact that you're potentially going to get some significant pushback. But I mean, I'm not an experiencer, but I'm having conversations on this topic more frequently with people that I thought would never be interested in this topic, and just random members of the general public. Like a couple months ago, I was traveling to Sydney, and I was going through the security checkpoint, and I was doing some research earlier in the year on the Phoenix Lights incident, and namely Kurt Russell's account of the Phoenix Lights. I uncovered some new information, and I was reading a book by Dr. Lin Kitai, and the security checkpoint agent or guy, he opened my bag, went through it, and he noticed the book. And before we knew it, we were having a lengthy conversation about UFOs. So I think people have there are a lot of people that have a curiosity on this topic. They just need to feel comfortable and safe to talk about it. And that's why I always think that, involving yourself in a community like the community that you offer, and podcasts or live streams, or being a part of MUFON and other organizations can really help bolster your can help you come out of your shell, and make you realize that there really is safety in numbers and strength in numbers. If you surround yourself that have a like mind of your own, then it's much easier to start talking about this topic. And the more you talk about it, the more you will feel comfortable about it, and the more you will do it on a more frequent basis. And that's very much where I've come from. Like throughout COVID, I was just sitting on the sidelines watching a lot of live streamers and podcasters talk about this topic. And it was an event called the Big Phone Home, which was an activism event that was trying to encourage everyday folks that had an appetite and a curiosity for this topic to engage their elected representatives and demand greater transparency from the government, and demand that the government take it more seriously. So being involved in that event for me really helped me get off my ass and get in the game rather than watch on the sidelines, and learning from people like John Greenwald Jr., who runs the blackvault.com, and he's been you're doing some wonderful work revealing information through the Freedom of Information Act in the United States for more than a couple of decades. So I've learned from John, and I've applied those learnings to trying to gain information that I have a right to. We all, as taxpayers, have a right to information. So if there's documentation that the Australian government has on UFOs or UAP, I have a right to that information, and I can ask for it, and I can do it through the Freedom of Information Act. And that's what I've been doing. And over the last, I would say, 6 months, it's revealing some pretty significant information, reiterating the mindset of the Australian Department of Defence and Royal Australian Air Force, that they have absolutely no desire to touch this topic. And if more and more people that were in my position that have never reached out to their elected representative, their member of parliament, or the senator before, if more and more people do that and start asking their elected representatives, well, why isn't Australia taking the UAP topic seriously when our US ally is? The more people that ask that of the elected representatives, those elected representatives are going to then ask questions of the Australian Department of Defence, the Royal Australian Air Force, and they're going to get answers. Because if Senator Wish Wilson, as an example, if he has questions that he wants to ask at a Senate estimates hearing, like he did in October of last year, the defence leadership is obligated to answer his questions. Whereas if I submit a Freedom of Information Act request, they can reject my request based on the administrative burden that it may put on the Freedom of Information team, because there's a big issue with freedom of information in general at the moment. It's in need of reform. So the more members of parliament and senators we can get engaged on this topic and taking it seriously, their questions go straight to the top of the pile. Their questions will get answered, whereas you can only go so far with securing information through Freedom of Information Act documents. It's good. It often, a Freedom of Information release will reveal more breadcrumbs for you that might form part of a larger loaf of bread, so you can then go after other information. But I do strongly believe that if we all engage our elected representatives consistently and persistently on this topic, Australia will start to listen and hopefully take it more seriously, rather than just waiting for things to develop in the US and then them just feeling like they have to get into the game. We can force their hand by demanding transparency now and reach out to our elected representatives.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So, in a example, like, where could these people sort of look for these representatives to be able to contact them, and what would you recommend for them to go and actually write down in these documents to send off to hierarchies?
yeah, good question. So so that was the whole focus of this event. That was this. It was an all-day online live stream activism event called the Big Phone Home 3. And I had the privilege and pleasure of being invited to participate in that event. And I had a 1 hour interview time slot with the hosts, Louise Jimenez, Ratherby Squidding, and Jane Kyle. They were the organizers of this event. And I was essentially just relaying during that live stream activism event the same information that I'm relaying to you now. And I would certainly encourage your listeners, if they want to, like I did, engage their elected representatives and demand that that the Australian government take this topic seriously, they can actually contact them via an email template that I had the good fortune of being asked to author for that Big Phone Home event. So if you want, I don't know if I've got screen sharing capability, but I can show your viewers, if you want,
I can
the
try and,
website.
you know, we must go full screen here and see if I can figure out, because I'm still learning this bloody thing here.
That's all good. I think I can do it. I'll just do it on my end. So let me know if you can see this. If you just add that screen I've shared to your stream, it might have displayed next to my video there.
Nothing showed up there. Hang on. Oh, that's sharing that screen. Hang on. I'm going the wrong one here. That's my screen. Let's have a look. Oh, yeah, there it is.
There we go. Yeah. So the web address, it's just thebigphonehome.com. And this, you can actually, if you want to, you can watch the event. It was an all-day live stream that was recorded in Australia on the 20th of August, 19th in the US. And I was on in the second hour. But if you just scroll on down the website, really just ignore, well, step one's an important one. So there is a petition in the US at the moment that we're asking people to sign to demand release of the gimbal, the Go Fast, and the Tic Tac video in their entirety, because it's about time we see that footage in its in its full entirety, rather than just the scraps that we've been given so far. But step three, if you come on down and you see this section labeled write an email or letter, there is an email script. The first one is US centric, so just ignore that one for the moment. But if you scroll on down, the second one is the template that that I authored, and it can, and you can tailor it and personalize it for best fit. But it's essentially a really good introductory email that you can send to your elected representative, your senator, or your member of parliament, that will introduce them to the UAP topic, highlight the potential threats to national security and flight safety of flight risk that they may pose military aviators, commercial pilots, and general aviation pilots. And it kind of just asks these questions, despite our US ally and Five Eyes partner taking the topic of UAP incredibly seriously, Australia is not. And, why is Australia not taking it seriously? And so we kind of ask these thought-provoking questions that if your senator or member of parliament read these, then hopefully that's going to get them thinking, well, maybe I should get some answers for my constituents, because we have the power. We vote in whichever party that we have a preference for, and know that you're a member of parliament, your senator, if you reach out to them consistently and persistently enough, they're going to take your inquiries seriously, and they're going to either respond to you, or for, as in one example recently, where an Australian gentleman who had watched my interview on the Big Phone Home, he used this email template. He copied and pasted it to his senator in the ACT, Senator Katie Gallagher, and Senator Gallagher had replied to him and said, "Thank you for bringing this information to my attention." And she then wrote a letter, addressed it, and sent it to the Minister for Defence, Richard Marles, asking Richard Marles to provide an answer to the questions that are posed in this email template. So this is just an example. I'm not saying this is the be-all, end-all approach, but if you're new to this topic and you've never, even if you're not new to the topic, if you haven't engaged your elected representatives before, you can just be as easy as you wish and just copy and paste this email template and send it to your elected representative. And if you're not sure how to contact your elected representative, if you just do a Google search, contact your member of parliament, you will be able to quickly and easily, pull up means by which you can reach out to them electronically, email, you can tweet them if you're on Twitter, you can send a message to them on Facebook if you want to do snail mail, or if you just want to jump on the phone and come up with your own script, you can. But we're seeing some success with that email template, so that's what I would certainly encourage that your listeners consider doing if they're keen to engage their elected representative.
Yep. So when it comes to the local electorate, is that it's in like the mayor, or would it be better to go for the premier maybe?
So I would suggest you do it at a state level. I mean, you can go if you want to. You could go local and state, but I would suggest you do it actually as at a federal level. So reach out to your members of parliament for your district or your. So for me, my member of parliament is Bill Shorten, former leader of the Labor Party, and I've reached out to him. He his engagement was a little bit lackluster. He responded, but he basically said, "Look, you're best positioned to direct your inquiries to the Minister of Defence," which was then Peter Dutton, which I did under the Liberal leadership, and now with Labor leadership. So that's where Richard Marles is. But if you, I don't know if you want to share the link with your audience. If you
through this, hang
on. So I'll just show you very quickly. I'll just pull up.
This one.
Bringing up the. No, I'll just bring up a link. I'm just going to pull up a brand new link for you. Here you go. So I can share this link with you, Anthony, if you want to post it in any commentary. But essentially, this is information on how you can contact your senators and members, and you can just essentially type in your postcode. I live in Melbourne, so if I did a 3000 search, it's going to tell me, well, who are the elected representatives for my postcode. If I wanted to reach out to Adam Bant, I can tweet him, I can email him. So this is a good way in which you can reach out to them electronically. Not all of them will have email addresses, as you can see, but if they don't, you can inquire as to that information directly from their office. You can give his electorate his electorate details or his office a call and find out what is an email address that you can send correspondence to. So this website's just the Australian, the Parliament of Australia website. All you need to do is a Google search is contact my elected or contact my member of parliament. And the first result that you'll get on Google is really, contacting senators and members Parliament of Australia website. So it's as simple as really just copying and pasting the email template and fire off an email and see how you go with your engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's awesome. Because I suppose it's one of the things like a lot of people are sort of confused on, like if they did want to attack them, like where exactly to go and hit them hard. Because everyone will probably go for the defense minister, and like obviously you're going to get a pretty lackluster sort of response, I suppose. But as you're saying, like the more people that sort of start hitting their local electorates and that sort of stuff, so they'll start banding together, more questions are going to be raised, and it's just to start being shown a lot more interest from the public and hopefully taken a lot more serious. So, no, it's awesome, mate. Thank you very much for showing us through that. That's excellent.
You're very welcome, and yeah, I would just encourage folks that if they are keen to reach out to their elected members of parliament and senators, then that's a really good introductory resource for you to rely on and tailor for best fit in a style that's appropriate for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely, mate. Look, mate, we're going to get to the end of the show there, mate. So, look, thank you very much for coming on, and thanks for all your hard efforts there, going hitting Australian governments, of course, trying to get some information out of them, and hopefully get them on the bandwagon with the American government at least.
That's the goal. So, I mean, I really appreciate the time you've given me. I'll keep on keeping on and try and engage, my elected reps and get, information from the Department of Defense to. The goal is to apply enough pressure through Freedom of Information Act requests and having more people ask questions of their elected representatives on this topic that they have to come to they'll have to come to a point where they'll need to conduct a formal review of their current position on UAP, because the current position of the Australian Department of Defence is we don't have any protocols or reporting mechanisms in place to investigate UAP or collect any data, and we haven't since 1996. We don't want to touch the subject. So if more people make noise about this topic, then eventually we can try and force their hand and get them to at least review their position on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hope so, because definitely need this. It's well overdue, to say the least. So yeah, mate. Look,
I agree with you.
again.
Yep, that's.
So
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
No. Well,
It was
are
a
you available
pleasure to
for
be with
people to get in contact with you if they have any questions regarding this whole thing?
Absolutely. I'm mainly on Twitter, so my Twitter handle is just @GrantLavac. My name's displayed on screen. It's if you're listening to the podcast version, @GRANTLAVAC. I'm very active on Twitter. I also have a YouTube channel called The Unexplained Rundown. Just search for Grant Lavac in YouTube and you'll find my channel. I've got a couple of videos on there that I've done to date. A bit of a deep dive analysis of what is Australia doing about UAPs. That's the primary focus of my content, but there's a few other bits and pieces in there as well. If you're a fan of the Phoenix Lights and you want to better understand Kurt Russell's account, there's a fun video on there as well. So yeah, YouTube and Twitter are the best places to find me.
Awesome. No, mate. Awesome. Absolutely awesome. Mate, again, thank you very much for your time coming on, mate, and giving a rundown of your whole endeavor, basically. But absolutely awesome, mate. So yeah, look, mate, again, to contact you down the track there, mate, and see where you're at, I suppose.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really appreciate you you having me on, giving me some time with your audience, and hope that we get some answers in the not too distant future.
Yeah, absolutely, and hopefully some more results at least, something compelling. So, mate, all right, mate. Thanks again. I'll catch you soon.
Okay.
Cheers,
all
mate.
the best.
Yeah.
Thanks, Anthony. Cheers.
And that will do it, folks, for this episode of Encounters Down Under. I hope you enjoyed the show, and remember, you can also get involved in the show by joining the Facebook page and getting in on the live streams. Also, please be sure to share with your friends and family to help us grow and potentially find our next guest on the show. If you or you know someone who has had an encounter, please get in touch with me through our Facebook page via Messenger or email at australianufosighting@outlook.com.au. I look forward to seeing you on the next Encounter Down Under. Hooroo!